Out of all the monsters in Monster Hunter, Devil Joe is definitely one of the most infamous ones in the series. Its overall appearance, demeanor, and gimmicks are what make it such a threatening presence among hunters. The fact that it can appear in almost any quest in Monster Hunter and royally fuck up your shit is not only horrifying, but also a staple in its mythos. Now, there are monsters like Basil Goose that are nomadic and can appear in random quests, but Devil Joe was the first one to do this. It's what the player is always trying to strive to be. You're either eons behind it or just as strong as it. That's it. There's no overpowering Devil Joe, especially its amped up counterpart, Savage Joe.
Nah, not just a counterpart, a variant. More furious than your garden variety Devil Joe, and twice as random.
Speaking of twice as random, Dak, what are you doing here?
Yo, what do you mean? You're the one who asked me to do this video.
Dak, they're not supposed to know that. This is supposed to look natural.
What's natural about any of this?
Dak, come on, just go with it. It's this whole thing that's just part of crossovers, that without it, it can't really be a crossover. And if we're not doing a crossover, then what are we doing here?
Hey, my mom drives a crossover.
Fuck it. Just cut to the intro. Back to the topic at hand, Savage Joe. This monster is known for being one of the strongest and most intimidating monsters in the Monster Hunter series. In its introduction in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, it had superseded the already destructive Devil Joe, and for a while, 3 Ultimate Savage Joe was the Ultimate Savage Joe, because let's face it, that bitch got hella nerfed in 4 Ultimate and Generation Ultimate. That aside, it has recently appeared in Iceborne, and has undergone many changes since its introduction in 3 Ultimate. And that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on today. So Dak, who do you think did it better?
Well, let me tell you about Savage Joe back in 3 Ultimate. Back in the day, Savage Joe made his inception in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. It was a good time. It was a time in which we were all comfortable with Monster Hunter as it stood. Devil Joe was a fan favorite. He was a very powerful brute wyvern, probably the strongest to exist. He had equal power to that of Elder Dragons, whom of which were, at the time, cream of the crop. The things you would grind over and over again at the end of the game so that way you can get the best armor, the best weapons, so on and so forth. However, when Savage Joe made his inception in the 3 Ultimate series, he was more than I actually bargained for. His ability to just decimate players was unprecedented. Well, maybe there's other monsters kind of akin to his power, but then again, I mean, he's just a regular monster. These monsters were Elder Dragons who had the power of him, regardless. In the beginning, Savage Devil Joe, in order to get to him, he had to go through him with an event quest. This event quest, however, wasn't his own particular quest. He was in it, don't get it twisted, but it was tasked with you, the hunter, to fight a Korapeko. The Korapeko would call the Devil Joe, and as soon as he would come into the area, you would know right away that he was mad different. You would look at his body and be like, yo, he has red and he has black. This is stuff that Devil Joe kind of has sometimes, but only when he's enraged. Joe is usually green. My man is a reddish, blackish kind of color. That's kind of crazy. It's like, what's going on? Then you will look at his face and the rest of his body, heavily scarred, larger than your average Devil Joe. What's going on? My man looks different. And then he hits you with a dragon breath without being enraged. That scared me when I first fought him, because we all knew that Devil Joe had to first be enraged to actually shoot the dragon breath. That was a big thing for me. And then when he does get enraged, all hell broke loose. You look at his face and you see the dragon shroud, the dragon element shroud over his face, eyes getting real dark with the red pupils, him being incredibly unstable, doing all sorts of random attacks, stomping around the ground, leaping everywhere, doing a dragon breath that has doubled the range, completely wiping out all gunners who thought they were safe and out of range, because my man, you was not. I myself got bodied by it a few times, more than a few times, because I mean, it's just so powerful. But when you go to fight him initially, it was like, dude, what do I do? This monster is like Devil Joe returned to 11. This was our first taste of Savage Joe. So making the generational leap, Savage Devil Joe was also in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. So we all know what Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate is. It was the game that a lot of us actually started playing the Monster Hunter series with. So Savage Devil Joe, he changed a lot in that game, because a lot of things in that game changed. A lot of mobility options were more available. They took away the underwater, added some verticality, and a bit of parkour elements. So they made the hunting faster. So what did they do in turn? They made the monsters faster, and one monster in particular, Savage Devil Joe. Now this time they took his name to an abruptly crazy level. He was savage, all right. Okay, he was still there. He still had the dragon shroud, the dragon breath without being enraged. They did nerf into the ground the range on his dragon breath though when enraged. It's not as long as it used to be back in the day. Like I said, prior in the 3rd generation 3 Ultimate, it was incredible. You were almost never out of range. It was almost full screen. But in this game, not so much. You kind of get out of the way a little bit. It's not ridiculous. It's not super ridiculous. Nevertheless, though, what they did though, they changed the way the breath looked as well. It used to be even more daunting. Now it just kind of looks like smoke. I don't know. We're not gonna get into that. What is here is the fact that his new thing was pinning. Devil Joe has always been able to pin the opponents. Back in the day, I'm gonna keep saying back in the day because those were some good times. In the 3rd generation, his pin was almost 100% certain death. So you absolutely did not want to get pinned by him, and you always ran dung bombs, dung bombs for that exact purpose. But in the 4th generation, the thing that really stood him out from his prior generation was his ability to pin on almost every individual attack. There was almost no attack that he would actually throw out that you were free from getting a pin from. If he would hit you with the tail, he could accidentally hit you with his tail, and then he would turn and pin on you. He would kind of brush across your thigh and then be pinned on. Take that for what you will. It's getting steamy in here. It is quite hot in here. But all of his attacks essentially turned into pitting attacks for him. So everything that we knew about him before was amplified to the fact that he was incredibly scary to fight. He was like command grabby. He was very grabby. He was creepy grabby. But Savage Joe in the 4th generation pinned you a lot. Okay, that was his main thing. He liked to do this, and he could do it off of essentially any attack. Like I said, if his tail touched you, he could turn on you and pin you. If he kind of swiped at you and kind of knocked you down, that was a pin attack. He could actually just do the pinning attack. It was a whole bunch of information to do this, increasing the ferocity that was the Savage Joe and solidifying his reign as being like the danger pickle.
If you've had the chance to face off with the almighty Savage Joe in Iceborne, then you would know just how different it is from what it was in 3 Ultimate. For whatever reason, which I'm not complaining about by any means, Iceborne seems to have revamped almost every single returning monster, and Savage Joe is no exception. In fact, I would say its fight has changed the most out of all the returning monsters introduced in Iceborne. For starters, instead of Savage Joe just being a constantly enraged Devil Joe, it now has some unique mechanics and moves that Devil Joe didn't have previously. Before we go over Savage's new features, let's briefly go over what Devil Joe did new in Monster Hunter World. The biggest change with Devil Joe is that its breath is a lot more of a threat now, since instead of it being a beam like it was in 3 Ultimate, it now becomes a cloud that moves away from it and covers a lot of range. Now, this might not seem like a huge change, but it is, especially when analyzing Savage Joe's changes. Speaking of Savage Joe's changes, it can now cover its face with Dragon Blight, which can slowly drain your health if you're inflicted with Dragon Blight, create Dragon Blight clouds that cover an area for a certain amount of time, it has a more powerful Dragon Blight beam, and finally, it gets a brand new powerful Godzilla beam that can one-shot you if you're not ready for it. So, as you can see, Savage Joe's fight is almost completely different from 3 Ultimate Savage Joe. This fight, in my opinion, feels more like a threat than it ever did in 3 Ultimate. However, I will say that it's not as ominous as it was in 3 Ultimate, considering that game had forced moments in the story where it would appear and it was there to show you how weak you were at that point in the story. Whereas in Iceborne, it would just randomly appear in a quest, fuck your shit up, and then leave. Honestly, Savage Joe really hasn't felt the same in that sense since 3 Ultimate, which is something that I think will remain to be true considering that it was introduced in that game. I mean, I think it would be giving Devil Joe a little bit too much special treatment if it did have specific story sections where it fucked your shit up, considering that most returning monsters don't get that kind of attention. Well, actually, I can think of one monster that still gets attention even though it really doesn't deserve it, and quite frankly, I think it needs to not be included in the next Monster Hunter game, but it probably won't because Capcom has a hard-on for this monster. Rathlos. So, that is why I think they changed Savage Joe so much when compared to the previous games. Since Capcom knows that they can't make Savage Joe intimidating through story means and presence like they did in 3 Ultimate, they made its gameplay more intimidating by giving it more powerful attacks and features, which is something I can't really complain about, even though I personally believe that intimidation through presence and randomness is more effective on a player than it is just to have a beefy monster. Despite all this, Savage Jho is still an amazing monster. It's just amazing in a completely different way than it was in the older games. And that is how Savage Jho has changed throughout the Monster Hunter series. So far anyway. I seriously doubt that these will be the last changes with its fight.
Who knows what the future holds for this savage brute? Who's to say he won't grow wings one day?
God, if Devil Jho grew wings, then it would be unstoppable. Wait, actually, that reminds me of another invader.
Yeah, I wonder who would fit such a description. A monster with no counters, just checks. Powerful enough to tangle with elders, but with the ability of flight.
It's funny that Basil Goose came up because Dak and I actually just made a video about this.
Yo, that's right. So if you want to check out more videos from us where we talk about more monsters from Monster Hunter, come check out this video I made about Basil Goose and Seething Basil Goose.
Before you check that video out, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then a like would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, my name is Ryan Kelly, and I hope to see you in Dak's video. Peace.